It was just another ordinary evening in the city. Streets buzzing with the usual crowd, neon lights reflecting off rain-slick pavement, car horns blaring in the distance. Steven Seagal walked with his signature calm, deliberate pace, hands loosely at his sides, his eyes scanning the crowd with quiet precision. Nothing about him suggested tension, yet there was an unspoken awareness in the way he moved, like a predator moving through a jungle, alert to even the smallest hint of danger. A group of thugs, leaning against a dimly lit corner, spotted him. They exchanged smirks and nods, confident that this would be an easy target. Big talk, loud mouths, the kind who thrived on intimidating anyone who appeared even slightly out of place. They didn't know the history, the skill, the reputation of the man walking toward them. To them, he was just another person. An easy mark. "Look at this guy," one of them whispered. "Thinks he can just walk by without noticing us. Let's have some fun." They stepped forward, cracking their knuckles, swaggering with overconfidence. Laughter echoed down the alley as they circled him, trying to intimidate, trying to provoke a reaction. Every instinct screamed, "Don't mess with him," but ego can be a dangerous thing, and theirs was fully inflated. Seagal didn't flinch. He didn't turn his head. He simply slowed his pace, subtly shifting his stance, letting them make the first move. There was no fear, no aggression in his eyes, only a quiet, controlled observation. Each thug's movement, each shift in weight, each minor twitch of their hands, he registered with calm precision. The crowd nearby began to notice. Phones were raised, cameras clicking, whispers spreading. "Who is this guy? He looks calm, almost too calm." And then came the moment that made the tension almost unbearable. The leader of the thugs stepped closer, grinning, assuming dominance. "Hey, old man, think you can just walk past us? Maybe we teach you a lesson." Steven stopped. Just a subtle pause, a slight shift in weight. No words. But in that moment, the energy in the alley changed. What the thugs didn't yet understand was simple. They had underestimated him. Every bone, every move, every muscle in his body was trained for situations exactly like this. And one wrong move from them could cost them far more than they ever imagined. The alley felt smaller now, tighter, almost suffocating. The thugs had closed in, forming a semicircle around Steven Seagal. Their grins had grown wider, more arrogant, fueled by the illusion of control. One of them cracked his knuckles with audible force, the sound echoing off the brick walls, a hollow warning. "You're not going anywhere, old man," he sneered, leaning forward, testing boundaries. "Maybe we should teach you a lesson." But Steven didn't respond. His eyes scanned them quietly, almost lazily, but every micro-expression, every subtle shift in stance, was catalogued, analyzed, and stored. To the untrained eye, he looked calm, unassuming, even vulnerable, but that calmness was a weapon in itself. Every step he had taken, every fight he had survived, had trained him for this exact moment. The thugs had no idea the storm they had walked straight into. They moved closer, attempting to provoke him, shoving and mocking, thinking that aggression alone could shake a man. One thug stepped in, elbow out, trying to shove Steven's shoulder. It barely touched him before Steven's arm subtly adjusted, guiding the thug's momentum harmlessly aside. The thug stumbled slightly, surprised, but quickly masked it with a cocky laugh. Another thug tried to circle him, aiming for intimidation. But even as they moved, Steven's presence was magnetic yet unsettling. There was an energy in the air, a silent warning in every measured breath he took. The alley, once full of bluster and bravado, now carried a quiet tension, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Crowd members had begun to notice. A few pedestrians slowed, others paused entirely, some cautiously raising their phones to record the moment. Whispers spread, "Who is this guy? He doesn't even look scared. Look at him. He's not moving, but he's watching everything." Steven tilted his head slightly, observing the subtle signs of fear beginning to creep into the thug's eyes. Confidence can only carry a person so far when confronted with precision and control, and that realization was dawning too late for them. The leader of the group, trying to reassert dominance, took a step closer. "Hey, we're talking to you," he shouted, voice sharper now, tinged with frustration. "You gonna stand there like a statue, or are you gonna do something?" Steven exhaled slowly. No sudden movements, no verbal retort, just a calm, deliberate pause. But in that pause, the message was clear. He was fully capable of ending this in seconds, and any mistake from them could be their undoing. Imagine standing there, in that very alley, watching this tense standoff unfold. The street smells of asphalt and faint cigarette smoke, the echo of distant traffic mixing with the sharp sound of knuckles cracking. Phones are out, whispers are spreading, but your heart is racing. If I were standing there, right behind the line of witnesses, here's what I'd be thinking. First, I'd be calculating distances. How close is each thug to Steven? Next, I'd be noting every slight movement, the way their weight shifts, the tension in their shoulders, the nervous flicker in their eyes. Finally, I'd mentally prepare my own reaction, just in case anything escalates. Even as a bystander, there's a rush of adrenaline, a sense of helplessness mixed with awe. Now imagine this. If you were there, in this alley, witnessing Steven Seagal's calm precision as these thugs pressed forward, what would you do? Would you freeze like most people, admire silently, or try to intervene? More importantly, if you were him, how would you handle it? Back in the alley, the tension ratcheted higher. One thug, emboldened by the other's laughter, decided to throw the first real punch. The movement was sloppy, reckless. Steven shifted almost imperceptibly, the punch barely grazing air as his opponent lost balance. The thug staggered back, eyes wide with shock, blinking rapidly as if to confirm what had just happened. The rest of the group hesitated. Confidence had faltered. They had thought this would be a simple display of dominance, a moment to scare a man who looked old and vulnerable. Instead, they were confronted by the unmistakable aura of control, skill, and patience. Every second Steven remained calm, the psychological pressure increased. Even the casual onlookers could sense the shift. The swaggering thugs now had uncertainty creeping into their stance, their bravado cracking. The alley that had begun as a stage for bullying was now a tense arena where one misstep could result in instant, irreversible consequences. Steven didn't speak. He didn't yell. He just existed in the space, controlled and precise, letting the thugs' overconfidence and aggression work against them. Every twitch, every feint, every raised hand was being noted, and every observer could feel it, the calm before the storm. In that moment, anyone watching closely would realize, these thugs had no idea what they were up against. The alley's energy had shifted. What had started as a routine act of intimidation was now a test of nerves, skill, and precision. The thugs, emboldened by their earlier arrogance, took a step closer, convinced that Seagal was merely bluffing. One of them lunged with a sloppy punch, his fist aimed for Steven's chest. Steven moved almost imperceptibly, a subtle lean to the side, a shift of weight on his back foot, and the punch connected with nothing but air. The thug stumbled forward, momentarily off balance, his jaw clenching in frustration. The others blinked, hesitating, their confidence starting to waver. The tension was thick, almost tangible. Every eye in the alley was locked on Steven. Cameras clicked, whispers spread, and some bystanders even held their breath. They could feel that something extraordinary was happening, something that would either end in violence or in complete humiliation for the bullies. Steven didn't respond verbally. His calm presence was more intimidating than a shout. Each movement was calculated, each shift in stance deliberate. He allowed the thugs to make the next move, letting their own aggression betray them. One tried to circle him, attempting a sneak attack from the side. Steven's awareness was instantaneous. He subtly adjusted his angle, redirecting the thug's momentum with minimal effort, using the attacker's own energy against him. The crowd watching was becoming increasingly vocal, though cautious. Some gasped, others whispered in disbelief. "Did you see that? He didn't even touch him, and the guy is already stumbling." Phones were raised high, recording every movement, every shift in energy. The thugs were beginning to realize that this man, this quiet, calm figure, was not to be underestimated. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of that alley, heart racing, witnessing this tense confrontation. The air smells faintly of wet asphalt, mixed with sweat and adrenaline. The thugs' shouts and laughter echo off the walls, but Steven moves like a shadow, perfectly composed. If I were in that moment, here's what I would be thinking. I'd be analyzing every movement, predicting the next punch, every angle of attack. My pulse would spike, but I'd force myself to stay calm, aware that any sudden move could trigger chaos. Mentally, I'd prepare to react instantly, but only if absolutely necessary. Patience and control would be my first weapons. Now imagine if you were Steven Seagal in this scenario. How would you respond? Would you immediately strike, or would you rely on observation and letting the aggressors make mistakes? Back in the alley, the leader of the thugs, frustrated by the lack of immediate retaliation, decided to escalate. He stepped closer, his hand raised, attempting a forceful shove to test Steven's strength. But Steven's calm control turned that shove into an almost imperceptible redirection. The thug stumbled yet again, this time catching himself with an awkward laugh, but his confidence was shaken. The other thugs hesitated, exchanging glances. The earlier bravado, the swagger they had flaunted, was starting to crack. Their leader, trying to assert dominance, barked instructions, but even he was uncertain. Every subtle motion of Steven communicated mastery. A flick of his wrist, a shift of weight, a calm breath, everything sent the silent message, one wrong move and you'll regret it. The crowd had grown slightly bolder. Some spectators whispered to each other, "He doesn't even need to fight. Look at how they're hesitating." Others raised their phones higher, capturing what could only be described as a masterclass in calm control and situational awareness. Steven remained patient. He didn't need to prove anything yet. The beauty of his skill lay in precision, timing, and control. Every thug's action now worked against them. The more they tried to intimidate him, the more exposed they became, not because Steven was aggressive, but because he let their own errors reveal themselves. In that moment, the alley was a classroom in combat strategy. The thugs were unknowing students, and Steven Seagal was the teacher. With each failed attempt, their confidence dwindled. One could almost see the realization dawning in their eyes. They had underestimated a man who had mastered not just physical combat, but the power of patience, observation, and precision. The air was electric with tension. Every observer could feel it, the thug's arrogance beginning to crumble, and Steven's quiet authority rising. The alley had grown quiet, almost unnaturally so. The thugs, once brimming with confidence and arrogance, now hesitated. They exchanged nervous glances, unconsciously stepping back, yet neither could fully admit defeat. The energy had shifted. The entire scene, the flickering streetlights, the echo of distant traffic, even the distant hum of the city, seemed to pause, focusing entirely on Steven Seagal. Seagal stood calmly, his body relaxed but alert. Every muscle was ready, but there was no tension in his posture. He wasn't moving aggressively, nor was he making sudden gestures. His presence alone began to exert control over the space. The way he tilted his head, the slight shift in weight from one foot to another, the way his eyes scanned the thugs, it all communicated a subtle but powerful warning: one wrong move, and you'll regret it. The leader of the group, trying to regain some semblance of dominance, stepped forward again. "Hey, don't just stand there, man. Fight or get out of our way," he shouted, his voice louder but noticeably shakier. The other thugs fidgeted, some taking half steps backward, their bravado beginning to crack. Seagal didn't speak. He didn't even flinch. His eyes, calm and unwavering, met theirs, and in that single glance, a silent message was delivered. Every thug could feel it, even if they couldn't articulate it. This was a man they had underestimated. Confidence could only go so far when facing someone who had mastered control, patience, and precision. A subtle shift of his weight was all it took to throw off the leader's balance slightly. He hadn't even touched him yet. Just standing there, unshaken, Steven had turned the tide of intimidation. The thugs were beginning to doubt themselves, questioning whether they had made the gravest mistake of their lives by attempting to bully him. Even the bystanders, who had been tense witnesses up to this point, now began to sense the silent power in the alley. Phones were raised higher, capturing every moment, while whispers ran through the crowd, "He doesn't need to fight. Just look at them, they're scared." Some even took a cautious step closer, eyes wide, completely absorbed in the lesson of control and skill they were witnessing firsthand. Imagine standing there, seeing this unfold. The thugs are closing in, their voices loud and threatening, but the target of their aggression stands calm, unshaken. Your heart is racing. Your pulse is pounding. You know something extraordinary is about to happen. If I were in Steven Seagal's position right now, here's what I would be thinking. I wouldn't move recklessly. Patience is my weapon. Every subtle shift in stance, every small glance, communicates authority. I don't need to strike immediately. I just let them make mistakes. I would read every micro-expression, every twitch, every hand movement. One wrong step from them, one overextended motion, and the outcome is already in my favor. Now, imagine you were Steven Seagal. How would you handle this? Would you make a bold move, or let them expose their own weakness first? The leader, growing frustrated, waved his arms wildly. "Come on! Don't just stand there!" But the subtle changes in his body language betrayed his fear. His stance was uneven. His confidence, once his greatest weapon, had turned against him. Every small misstep amplified the silent authority emanating from Steven. Steven's calm and deliberate posture was now a weapon more effective than any strike. The thugs began to shift nervously, their coordination falling apart. The energy in the alley had completely changed. They were no longer aggressors. They were uncertain, intimidated, and on the defensive. Even the smallest onlookers could sense it. You didn't need to understand martial arts to see that something extraordinary was happening. Steven wasn't moving fast. He wasn't shouting. But the sheer presence of control, the mastery of timing and stance, had made the thugs second-guess everything they had intended to do. The alley was silent except for the thugs' tentative shuffles, the faint hum of city life, and the soft click of phones recording every moment. Steven had turned intimidation into a silent warning, demonstrating that sometimes mastery doesn't need to be loud. It only needs to be precise, patient, and fully controlled. One by one, the thugs' bravado faded. Their confidence that had brought them here was dissolving into fear, confusion, and regret. All without a single blow being struck. The silent warning had spoken louder than any yell, louder than any threat, louder than any act of aggression. And in that quiet, tense moment, everyone watching realized a simple truth. They had underestimated a master, and the consequences of that miscalculation would be immediate and undeniable. The alley had grown almost painfully silent. The thugs, once loud and brash, were now uncertain, their confidence eroding with every subtle movement of Steven Seagal. He had not raised a hand, had not shouted, and had not even made a threatening motion, but the energy in the air had shifted completely. They had made the fatal mistake of underestimating him. It began with a subtle shift of his foot, a slight pivot of his hips. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like nothing at all, a casual adjustment, a momentary pause. But to anyone paying attention, to anyone who understood the mastery of martial arts, it was the beginning of the end for the aggressors. Steven had positioned himself perfectly, using every ounce of spatial awareness to prepare for the first precise, controlled strike. The leader of the thugs, sensing the change, stepped forward in a desperate attempt to regain control. His fist swung in a wide, sloppy arc, aimed directly at Steven. With a calmness that could only come from decades of experience, Steven intercepted the motion, not with brute force, but with perfect redirection. His hand met the thug's wrist in an almost effortless motion, guiding the punch harmlessly aside. The force of the punch was transferred back into the aggressor's body, and the thug stumbled off balance, landing hard against the alley wall with a startled gasp. The rest of the group froze. Their bravado had completely evaporated. What they had assumed would be a quick intimidation had transformed into a demonstration of terrifying precision. Every twitch, every movement from them was being monitored and exploited. They realized, too late, that this man's calm was not weakness, it was lethal control. Another thug rushed forward, hoping to assist his leader. Steven, his movements smooth and almost hypnotic, stepped lightly to the side. With one clean, controlled motion, He unbalanced the attacker, using the man's own momentum to send him sprawling to the ground. There was no wasted energy, no unnecessary violence, just calculated efficiency. Bones weren't broken yet, but the threat had been made clear. One mistake, and the consequences would be immediate. The leader staggered back, eyes wide, his mouth opening and closing as if to shout, but he couldn't find the words. The air in the alley vibrated with tension and awe. Bystanders, who had been watching nervously, now gasped audibly. Phones clicked, recording the entire display. Some whispered in disbelief, "Did you see that? He didn't even touch them aggressively, and they're falling like that." Steven's calm didn't waver. One more small shift of his stance, one subtle movement of his hands, and the remaining thugs were visibly shaken. The moment was absolute. The first real strike had demonstrated a truth that could not be ignored. This wasn't about brute strength. This wasn't about aggression. It was about control, precision, and mastery. The leader of the group finally fell to one knee, his earlier arrogance replaced by raw fear. The others flinched, looking to him for guidance, only to see the hopelessness in his eyes. One by one, they realized the mistake they had made. They had chosen to challenge a man who had perfected the art of defensive combat. A man who had trained his mind and body to respond with flawless timing and devastating efficiency. The crowd, now fully engaged, could hardly believe what they were witnessing. Some leaned forward, trying to catch every movement. Others whispered to themselves, awestruck, "He didn't even need to punch hard. His skill alone broke their confidence." Phones recorded every angle, knowing that this moment was destined to be shared far and wide. For Steven, it was just another test, calmly executed, perfectly measured. He did not gloat, did not revel in their humiliation. His focus remained on control, awareness, and the lesson being demonstrated. In that brief, electrifying moment, the thugs understood the harsh truth. They had attempted to bully a man who could dismantle them effortlessly, and they had underestimated him at their own peril. As they stumbled away, shaken and humiliated, the alley returned to silence. Steven straightened, adjusted his posture, and continued walking. The crowd that had gathered began to murmur in awe. The thugs, humbled and regretful, would never forget this encounter. And the lesson was clear. Skill, patience, and precise control triumph over arrogance and brute aggression every single time. The alley was silent except for the ragged breathing of the defeated thugs. Their bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by shock, humiliation, and a creeping sense of regret. What had begun as an act of arrogance, intimidating a lone man, had ended in an undeniable lesson in skill, control, and precision. Steven Seagal had not struck with fury. He had struck with purpose. One precise movement was all it took to expose the limits of their aggression. The leader of the group, who had once exuded confidence and dominance, was now slumped against the wall. His fists, once raised, now hung limp at his sides. His eyes, wide with disbelief, darted from Steven to the other thugs. They were shaken, not by the pain of a strike, but by the realization that they had underestimated a master. Every miscalculated move, every display of arrogance, had been expertly countered. The bystanders, who had been holding their breath moments ago, began to exhale, murmuring in astonishment. Phones were still recording, their screens capturing every detail of the encounter. "Did you see that?" one whispered. "He didn't even need to hit them hard. It was like he controlled them with his mind." Another added, "I've never seen anyone so calm, so deadly." The footage was destined to go viral, a silent testament to Seagal's mastery. Even the thugs themselves could no longer deny it. Fear and respect mingled in their eyes as they realized their mistake. For a moment, one could see them replaying their own actions, each error highlighted in stark relief by Seagal's effortless defense. Their overconfidence had been their undoing, and it was clear that this encounter would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Now, imagine standing in that alley, witnessing the aftermath. You've watched arrogance crumble before mastery. You've seen confidence turn to regret in a matter of seconds. The energy is thick with tension and awe. If I were one of the thugs at that moment, I'd be trembling, not just from fear, but from the sudden clarity of how badly I miscalculated. My pride would be shattered, my ego bruised, and my mind racing. How did I think I could intimidate this man? One wrong move, and it could have been far worse. If I were a bystander, I'd be in awe, recording every detail, replaying the mental lesson being demonstrated. Every subtle shift, every controlled movement, would be etched into my mind as a blueprint for how true skill operates. Now, it's your turn. Imagine yourself there. If you were one of the thugs, or if you were watching from the sidelines, what would your reaction be? What would you be thinking? Back in the alley, the thugs stumbled backward, some brushing against the walls for support, others muttering quietly to themselves. Their arrogance had been stripped away in the blink of an eye. Steven Seagal remained calm, composed, and silent. His presence alone was a lesson more powerful than any words or shouts could convey. The crowd began to whisper about the incident, spreading the story on social media. Clips of the encounter would soon circulate online, viewers across the world marveling at Seagal's skill. Comments predicting what happened next flooded in. This is what happens when you underestimate a master. He didn't even need to strike hard. Mastery beats force every time. The story was beginning to live a life of its own, a viral testament to the consequences of arrogance and the power of control. One bystander, shaking slightly, approached Steven with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "That was unbelievable," they murmured. "You didn't even need to strike hard, yet they've learned their lesson." Steven nodded ever so slightly, a quiet acknowledgement, without pride or gloating. His mastery wasn't about showing dominance, it was about demonstrating the power of calm, precise skill, and the consequences of underestimating it. The thugs, now humbled, finally turned and fled, their confidence completely shattered. The alley, which had once felt threatening, now seemed almost serene, filled with the echoes of awestruck whispers and the hum of smartphones capturing every moment. For the onlookers, it was more than just a fight. It was a lesson. Arrogance and aggression can only carry a person so far, and underestimating true skill comes with immediate consequences. Every movement Steven had made was a demonstration of patience, precision, and control. And the world was watching. The alley had returned to its quiet state, but the echoes of what had just occurred lingered in the minds of everyone present. The thugs had fled, their bravado replaced by regret and fear, while the bystanders stood in stunned silence. Phones were still raised, recording the aftermath, capturing the subtle movements and unwavering calm of Steven Seagal. Clips of the encounter would soon travel far beyond this street, across the city, the country, and eventually the world. News of the incident spread like wildfire. Social media platforms exploded with short clips and slow-motion highlights of Steven's precision and control. Comments poured in from viewers who could hardly believe what they had witnessed. "This is how true skill looks. I've never seen someone handle a situation so calmly yet decisively. You don't fight with rage, you fight with control, and he just proved it." The story went viral not because of violence, but because of mastery. It wasn't the sheer force that impressed the world, it was the silence, precision, and calm control that turned potential chaos into a demonstration of skill and awareness. People around the globe were talking about it, analyzing every frame, discussing what they would do if they were in the alley, and marveling at how one man could command respect without aggression. Bystanders who had been present that night recounted the story repeatedly. "He didn't shout. He didn't strike first," one whispered to a friend. And yet, within seconds, you could see they regretted ever thinking they could intimidate him. Others noted the mental battle that had occurred. It wasn't just physical. It was psychological. That calm presence, it broke their confidence faster than any strike could have. Even the thugs themselves were now facing social consequences. Videos of their failed attempts circulated online, showing them stumbling, off balance, and completely humbled. Comments criticized their arrogance and celebrated Seagal's patience, skill, and control. Within hours, the alley had become a legend, a small urban stage where mastery had defeated aggression. Now, imagine yourself watching this unfold online or standing there in the alley. What would your reaction be? The thugs humiliated, the crowd astonished, and Steven Seagal walking calmly away as if nothing had happened. If I were one of the bystanders, I'd feel a mix of awe, fear, and inspiration. I'd be thinking, that's what mastery looks like. That's the power of control over chaos. If I were there, I would never underestimate someone like that again. I'd remember this lesson forever. If I were one of the thugs, I'd be replaying every movement in my mind, every subtle shift, and every moment I misjudged him. The regret would be instant and absolute. If I were there, I would have never challenged him. One wrong move could have ended me. As the night deepened, people began to share the story far and wide. Every retweet, every share, every video clip carried the same powerful message. Arrogance can only take you so far, but skill and calm mastery will always prevail. Steven Seagal's walk down that alley became a lesson in humility, precision, and patience. He had not needed to shout, to attack recklessly, or to prove dominance with brute force. One man, calm and controlled, had turned a potential act of aggression into a teaching moment for the world. And now, the world had taken notice. Every viewer who had watched the viral clips understood the same principle. Preparation, control, and skill always trump rashness, arrogance, and overconfidence. The story wasn't just about a fight, it was about respect, awareness, and the consequences of underestimating someone who had mastered themselves. If you believe in the power of calm skill over reckless aggression, smash that like button, comment your detailed thoughts. Share your perspective, your strategy, or your lessons learned. And don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable real-life martial arts stories, where patience, control, and skill always take center stage. Remember, true mastery doesn't shout. It moves silently, observes sharply, and commands respect.